The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we are going to answer a listener email, and we have a question from Stanley, who lives in Johannesburg, South Africa. And Stanley asks, your President Trump announced he brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Then suddenly he used some colorful language not normally used in polite circles, which was no surprise. Yes, I agree, it's no surprise, as both sides seem to have broken that agreement. Yes. Trump, was especially hard on the Israeli Prime Minister. Now it's being reported the ceasefire is back on. So, does the panel think that this might be it? Is the conflict close to over, or is this just a pause? And finally, do you think the U.S. still has the credibility actually to be a player in this crisis? And Scott, in particular, Mark?
Was that Scott, your particular or peculiar?
Yeah, Scott in particular. Mark, you want to start?
Where do you want to start? Where do you want to start?
Yes.
And I also have a question.
Tell me where you want to start with that, because there was a lot of parts to that.
Let me just say this about the colorful language that we use.
And I have a question too about it.
Okay. About the colorful language that we use. Let's remember that this is the same country that almost lost their minds because Obama wore a tan suit. But, using this kind of language, that's okay. So I find that rather funny.
Well, look, you know what? Strong language. Hey, man, I'm from Brooklyn and Trump is from Queens. The BQE connects us. There's nothing we can do about it. We are who we are. We are how we grow up. I used to ride my bike by his parents' house all the time when I lived in Fresh Meadows, which is right by Jamaica Estates where he grew up. And, so I understand a little about Trump's manner, the way he speaks, the way he communicates, the way he looks at the world. It's very outer borough and not particularly, what we would say, je ne sais quoi or whatever. However, I would much prefer a cussing president to a president who denigrates the office by selling cologne during his presidency, as he did this week. Trump cologne, Trump
phones,
phones,
cell phones,
cell phones, Trump cell phones, made in China, sold for $499. He's clearly decided that the presidency is shit. The country is shit. He is destroying this country from within, and he wants to knock down every institution that the American people have long relied on to become the greatest country in the history of the world. And he simply wants to destroy all that. We could discuss my various theories on why he wants to do that and for whom. But I guess I'll just say that if you can't beat him, join him. And if you can't, and nobody could beat us. So how much better would it be to install in the United States a president who rips the country apart from within rather than trying to invade us from the outside? And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. So, I could live with the cussing. We all know that, Clinton had a foul mouth. Obama would let slip every now and then. Nobody comes across
Biden
more.
Definitely had him. Biden definitely could have some colorful language.
Yeah. And, he controlled himself, which not every executive can do. But he controlled himself and didn't do it in public as much as the current chief is concerned. But, the cheapening of the presidency, the cheapening of the office, that is something that, I suppose will in some measure recover from, but it's likely that we're on a slippery slope now in America, and that all these institutions that we rely on are, are from the bygone days. The new power in town is ICE and Homeland Security. They've got more funding than the U.S. Marines, and their focus is internally. We have an army, a vast army of people going out there to arrest busboys, and America has never looked so cheap, in my opinion.
Yeah. And yeah, it's true, Scott. I mean, I'm also from New York, upstate. Of course, most of the people down in your area of New York would say we're Canadians, which
Right.
at this point in time, I'm kind of happy about. I don't mind being a Canadian.
Or Pennsylvanians.
That's right. There you go. But, again, I go back to the fact of the things that people lose their mind about, what was normal back then compared to what they lose their mind about today. And again, I agree with you. I mean, I'm from New York, and I truly believe that swearing sometimes is just nothing more than a colorful metaphor. Sometimes it's used to get a point across. We try as academics not to do it, but it just happened here in this podcast. Something gets under my, I get a thorn in my claw, and I'll go off and use some colorful language myself. So I agree with you. I don't have as big a problem with that. I have a big problem with, as you say, destroying the country from within, but also there has to be some set of decorum. If he was swearing about the Congress, if he was swearing about the Supreme Court, if he was swearing about a governor, okay, fine, that's internal. But we're talking about other nations. And I think that, you have to have at least enough self-control to be able to remember in the arena of dealing with other nations, there is a decorum there that you have got to maintain if you're going to maintain credibility and if you're going to be effective. Which brings it to the second question. Are we still relevant? Over the past week, it's beginning to look more and more like we're not. They seem to be going around us. The United States is not even, being considered in a lot of cases. We talked about last week when we had the little bit of technical issues about who should be excluded from peace talks. And I think the general consensus was probably you don't want the United States involved, because all they're going to do is bring chaos into this. You don't want the Russians, definitely. But you know what? Maybe the Chinese, because the Chinese sometimes, here's the funny thing. The Chinese are actually sounding sensible, which most Americans would have thought was never going to be the case, but they're actually sounding sensible compared to what we've got. So, there was some talk that they're looking at changing out the World Trade Organization, getting rid of it. And there's going to be a new organization created that they've started looking into in a lot of countries. And the United States is not being included into it. We are conspicuous in our absence. As a matter of fact, they don't even want us in it, because they're beginning to find, and we've said this before, that if we're going to be unpredictable, if we're not going to be the steady United States that we've always been, then you know what? We're better off just ignoring them. And I think that's exactly what they're doing.
So I have a question, and I agree with you, Mark. We are irrelevant, and we're becoming more irrelevant, and that's something that Trump and his advisors really should have been able to understand before they were saying, well, they have to do what we say, or they have to consider us, or whatever it was that Rubio was saying, they have to deal with us. No, actually they don't. And they're not. Surprise, surprise. So the question, Scott, that I have, and for Mark, you also, after Trump had these bombs dropped and where Hegseth said, oh, such a marvelous, this is the greatest
thing.
bombing run and all this in the history of the world. And the plans, by the way, for that bombing, for anyone of our listeners who does not know this, that all those plans were prepared and practiced under the Biden administration. That had nothing to do with Trump. And nothing takes anything away from the men and women who flew those planes. Netanyahu had already said that, unless I'm much mistaken, that Israel had incapacitated Iran's nuclear program before Trump dropped those bombs or gave the order to drop those bombs. And then Trump says, well, that the United States did it. So I want to know, I mean, it seems to me that the United States didn't even have to become involved, and that Trump did it simply for the attention on himself, and then so that he could be a war, a war president too, or whatever, because Netanyahu was getting a lot of attention. And I don't know really. I mean, I don't given the situation there, and the fact that Netanyahu is as long as Netanyahu can continue an overt confrontation, he is likely to remain in power. I don't see that there's going to be any type of a lasting peace there, and that's so. I wanted to know whether you felt that we even had to become involved at all, which I really question. And of course, as more information comes out, while bombs certainly make a huge mess on the surface, as we discussed before, they don't necessarily destroy everything that is buried deeply underground. And Trump is now apparently wanting to sue CNN and the reporter who reported what the Pentagon said, that the nuclear program, Iran's nuclear program, had not been obliterated as Trump said, because according to Trump, they're lying, but they're simply the messenger for what the Pentagon said.
Right.
So now Trump wants to sue them.
Yes.
So yeah, please go ahead.
Here's the take on this. Number one, I think we said this before. Did we get involved? Yes. Why did we get involved? Trump needed a win. He needed to look like he was getting a win. That's bottom line. I mean, could they let the Israelis do this? Absolutely. But it wasn't as big a win to say we had our bombers go over there and do this. So that's why this happened. Where it go from there? I don't know, Scott. What do you think?
Well, it seems that there's a general consensus that this does not destroy the Iranian nuclear program.
Right.
That there's a certain amount of uranium. I've seen different accounts of how much that is not accounted for, and probably is unaccountable at the moment. And that we probably strengthened the resolve of the Iranians to have a nuclear bomb to prevent this kind of incursion and even the actions of the Israelis in the future. So we dropped a lot of bombs, accomplished extremely little, strengthened the resolve of our enemies to be stronger and have deterrence effect against us. And it goes on. There's no end. It's not over. The Israelis are not making a deal with Iran for any kind of peace, as long as there's a chance that Iran is going to use the time of quiet to create a nuclear weapon, which they almost assuredly are going to do or are already doing. There's no reason to think that they're not. So, the situation goes on. The war is not over, because the war has always been about Iran's existential threat to Israel, and Israel is not going to allow that to happen. Now, if Trump were to drop 12 more of those bombs and put them in the pickle barrel, as they like to say, and heap damage on damage, we don't know what the effect would be, but they would get deeper, right? There's a hole that they can go down that would get them closer to the target that they thought they were hitting the first time, but fell, according to people, 100 feet or 100 yards or whatever it is short.
We don't have 12 left. We had 20. We used 12. We have 8 remaining. So we don't have that many left. Yeah, apparently.
Right. But it's a growth industry for sure, creating big bombs. And there are other even bigger bombs. What if we were to, drop the Moab in there? Or I wouldn't put it past Trump to drop a tactical nuclear bomb that's slightly smaller than the one they dropped on Hiroshima over there. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Would it surprise anybody here if Trump did that? Nothing is going to surprise me at this point. So, it's not over. There's no peace. There's no Nobel Prize coming your way, sir. And the situation continues. As far as Netanyahu is concerned, the Israeli people have to decide what they want to do. If they, I think they're more involved in the forever war in Gaza than they are in the forever war in Iran, for better or worse. That attack on October 7th was a huge wake-up call for the Israelis, and bringing back memories of the Intifada and bringing the second Intifada, bringing back memories of the Yom Kippur War, where they really thought that this was it. They're going to lose this war. Every Israeli will be dead by the end of the week. That's putting a hurting on the people there, and they're going to support the leader that they think can get them through it the best. And right now that appears to be Netanyahu, until somebody else emerges that is a better wartime leader than he is, because the country is at perpetual war.
Okay, so I'm going to do a Scott now. I am going to propose a theory. So, Scott,
you have to have a drink in your hand when you do this,
and I can't do cigars.
Maybe a cigar.
Maybe something. So here's my theory. We are in a conflict that has existed for an awful long time, and two of the main players in the conflict. You said you would not be surprised, Scott, if there was a tactical nuclear war had dropped, and I would say that would surprise me, because that might end this. We are in a situation where two people, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, under other circumstances, is not popular as far as leadership in their own country. This war at least gives them something to galvanize the people around and keep them semi-popular. As we've always said, most nations do not like to change leadership during wartime. Let's go back to FDR. He shouldn't have been for a fourth term, but you know what? Okay, there we have it. So my theory is that both Netanyahu and Trump don't want to win the war in Gaza, don't really want to win the war in Iran. They want them to continue because that gives them an avenue to be semi-popular with their populace. What do you think of that theory?
Well, it's interesting. Why do you say FDR shouldn't have been reelected the fourth time?
Because he was very sick.
Yeah.
He really did look bad in the fourth term.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty. I have to say, I was pretty shocked to learn that I think he was like 66 when he died, and he looks like he's about 86. So, yeah, it was a little shocking. Yeah. He was not well. Yeah. All right. For that reason, I thought there was a, No.
It was basically because, and a lot of people said, and it's very, very true. I saw this in a movie once. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was called The American President. And it was a very true statement. If we had news media then like we have today, The United States does not elect a person in a wheelchair.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I could agree
And
with that.
That's very, very true.
So, all right. So the question is, are they going to continue the war? They want to do enough just to continue fighting the war to keep themselves in power. And uh, yeah, I mean, certainly that would be a calculation I could see both men doing. That wouldn't surprise me either. Very little is surprising me these days. However, I do believe that there will be a diminishing return on that because people don't like perpetual war. The Israelis are tired of the war. Every Thursday night, they flood the streets and they say, "Bring the hostages home, end the hostilities in Gaza. Let's get back to being the country that we were on October 6th." And I really do think that the Israeli people want that, and and that they'll trust whoever their leader is, whether it's Netanyahu or somebody else, to do better than he did on October 6th, making sure that October 7th never happens. And just as we really didn't blame our leader for 9/11, I think that I could make a case that if the other person had been elected, Val Gore had been elected, and I didn't vote for him, so I'm not saying this as a sour grapes. I didn't vote for him, but Al Gore is more of a wonky type of guy, a detail-oriented guy, than the famously cavalier George W. Bush, and that he would have directed his government to hunt down these 19, 20 guys and stop them before that they could do that plot. The same thing, I believe, is true of COVID. If Hillary Clinton had become president instead of Donald Trump, there would have been no COVID pandemic. She would have stopped it in China and ended it right there. It might have cost some political points to shut down some places and quarantine some others, as Obama did in 2009. Not everybody was happy about that, who was involved in the quarantine. But he nipped it in the bud, let's say. And I think that both those things are true. I can't prove it, of course, because there's no way to prove it. But we didn't blame Bush for 9/11. We probably should have, and held him responsible for it, and not reelected him. Again, a matter for another time. But and Netanyahu has not paid the price that he needs to pay for his dereliction of duty, allowing 10/7 to happen. Truly do believe that, and he should, and I believe he at some point he will. He's also got criminal charges against him that are credible, and will someday proceed if they're not proceeding already. Again, we're not there yet, but perpetuating this war has diminishing returns, and so they're going to have to stop it at some point. The IDF may be holding off on that until they can guarantee that Hamas will never be a threat again, in the way that they seem to think that Hezbollah will never be a threat again, and that Iran will never be a threat again. Those are unprovable, obviously, but until they strike again, you can say, yeah, it's so far so good. It's going well. And I think the same thing is true in Gaza. Now, the bigger question, of course, is what happens next? What are we going to do with Gaza? I don't think Trump's proposal to turn it into Atlantic City is feasible in any rational way. But something does need to happen there. And I go back to this. There was a deal on the table. It had been accepted by all parties. Saudi Arabia was going to recognize Israel's right to exist. In exchange, the Palestinian state would become, at some point in the future, a reality. Work toward that would commence, and that is the best solution for everyone. There is still no better solution than a two-state solution with a lot of security guarantees and a lot of Arab countries bringing troops in to keep the peace on the border between those countries and the commerce that goes through. And that all you can hope for at that point is that the Palestinian people love the Palestinians more than they hate the Israelis and are willing to continue living side by side rather than trying to wipe Israel off the map altogether.
So just to finish up the listener's question, do you feel that the United States still has credibility
Not
regarding
currently.
this situation?
No.
Not currently. No, not currently. We don't have any credibility. I think that was part of the plan. We don't want to have credibility. Look, he went to NATO last week and he said, we're gonna raise the stakes here to 5% of your GDP for military. We don't want that. We don't want that. Our military is already absorbing more of our budget. Now we've got this internal army fighting against us here, sapping resources. We're turning ourselves into a police state by passing this bill, and like we want, there are so many things that we could do with peace. Think about the amount of money we just spent dropping bombs for no reason, no good reason, nothing, no good outcome came of dropping those bombs at a huge expense. And picture what you could have done with that money. Universal pre-K, universal breakfast for every kid in America when they get to school, college tuition for so many people. We're suffering in so many different ways. Healthcare for all, like every other country in the world, decent country in the world, has taxpayer or government funded, in the case of these rentier states, government funded healthcare for everyone. I'm going through a nightmare right now with healthcare, just a crazy system to try to get this hip replacement revised. And our healthcare system is just pathetic. We have the best hospitals, the best doctors in the world, but our healthcare system is as broken as anything we've ever seen before. And all of that could be changed simply by giving up these eternal wars or the spending on some imaginary war that's never going to happen in a way that matters. Because if it did happen, none of us would be here to see the end of it. So,
right,
that's my soapbox.
There you go. And you didn't use any bad language during it, so that was good.
Right.
Again, this is, our credibility not being very good in the global society, I think is planned. I kind of agree with that. This is what you do when you become protectionist and isolationist. You don't care what the rest of the world thinks. You look internally. And we have found, did you notice that? And again, there's been a lot of talk about how we do not condemn Russia for what they're doing in Ukraine. But we do condemn China because of trade, because that impacts us internally. That's domestic. Even though it's China, it's still a domestic issue that it's creating. Russia's attacking Ukraine does not create a domestic issue for us here. The war in Gaza and the war in Iran, should we be interested in it? Sure, we should, but it's not domestic. Yes, you're going to get some protest. Absolutely. There's going to be some domestic unrest because of it. Absolutely. But no, we are at a war with immigrants. And that's, again, that is what protectionism and isolationists do. And when you become protectionist, when you become isolationist, especially in today's society, you move toward autocracy. And that's again, if we look at every single marker out there, that's what we're moving toward. we're moving toward autocracy, if not monarchy. So again, it's the domestic issues that we're focusing on now, that this administration wants us to focus on, that the people who support this administration believe are the really important things that we should be paying attention to. And foreign policy, they're done with it. They just don't want anything to do with it. And again, that's a sign, and it's a sign that we really ought to be keeping an eye on, because what people forget is, if you have no credibility, if you have no place in global society as far as a major player, you're not going to have a place economically either. At one point in time, that wasn't true, but we're talking late 19th century, early 20th century. I mean, think about it. The first time the United States truly got involved in brokering as a world player, you got to go all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt, when he was the Sino-Russia War, that he brokered the peace for.
Japanese. We
were the neutral. We're now seen as the, I don't actually know exactly what they see us as anymore. I think we're more in the way than we are anything else. And we just can't get out of our own way. So if you want to have if you want to do protectionism, if you want to do isolationism, that's fine. But remember, that is going to affect your economy. An isolationist, and if you don't believe it, look at North Korea. You don't get any more isolated than North Korea. So there you go, folks. Here's your sign. You select it. That's the way it's going to go. And I'm sorry. I think we beat that to death. At least I hope we did.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting about Russia and Ukraine that we'll address in the next segment. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. So thank you, Stanley, for your question, and thank you to all our listeners for spending some time with us. And we'd like to thank all our subscribers for your continued support, and we do appreciate that. If you aren't a subscriber to the Nova Society on the platform of your choice, please do subscribe. We really appreciate that. Keep the emails coming. We appreciate your questions, and we will see you again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert, cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com.